You know you can't talk Neo on without discussing SMF, Scizor, Muck, Furret. Jason Klaczynski's famous GenCon 2003 winning deck that basically capped off the entire Wizards of the Coast era of competitive play. Steel types were already dominant in base Neo and Neon because they became huge, powerful tanks, and Aquapolis Scizor knocked it up another notch. Because Scizor is a steel type, every special metal energy you have attached to it is going to reduce incoming damage by 10. And then with heavy metal, that's also going to give you another potential 20 damage every time you attack for each of those special metal energies attached. So with heavy metal, if all three of those required energy are special metal, all incoming damage will be reduced by 30, and heavy metal will be dealing a minimum of 30 damage and a maximum of 90 damage for 3 energy. And at first glance, this seems like kind of a one-trick pony for a deck, because once that initial Scizor gets knocked out, you're going to lose all of those metal energy to the discard, and it's going to take a while to get those back and power up another Scizor, but this deck can easily account for that, and that is why it is so powerful. First of all, Energy Charge can help get those special metals out of the discard and right back into your deck. Secondly, Aquapolis also gave us Scavenger Hunt Furret, which lets you exchange 2 cards in your hand for any energy card out of your deck, including special energy. So not only is Furret's Scavenger Hunt making it very easy to get those metal energy straight out of your deck early game and get them attached to Scizor, which is going to make it harder for your opponent to knock Scizor out, it's also giving you a great recycle combo with Energy Charge so that you never run out of those metal energy, and other special energy cards that you may want to pull out of your deck for specific situations. And of course, the final piece is Muck. As reprinted in Legendary Collections, I absolutely hate this card, but competitively it does make sense. Toxic Gas is going to completely shut down Feraligatr decks, which were huge competition for Scizor, and most importantly, it's going to shut down the worst threat to Scizor, Fire decks, which mainly relied on EnteiCargo, or Charizard. Toxic Gas will severely hamper all 3 of those cards. And you may be thinking that Muck will also shut down Furret and Scizor's Pokemon powers, but that is why it's going to be used only when necessary in those specific matchups against decks that rely on Pokemon powers. Even then, you're still going to make sure to get off a couple of Scavenger Hunts before you lay down Muck, and you're not really going to miss Scizor's poison resistance. That's really only helpful in one matchup, and that is against Beedrill. Outside of speed drill builds, you don't really see poison as a special condition come up all that often in Neon. So now that we've gone over the importance of the S, M, and F, let's get into the rest of the build. The build I'm about to cover is the exact Jason Klaczynski build from 2003. So this is his version, not mine. I just wanted to go over this competitive version of the deck. As you'll see, it is such a strong deck because it's prepared for multiple matchups. It is expertly tailored for the format that it's in, which is why it won first place and why I wanted to cover that specific version here. So starting out, there are 2 different Aquapolis Scythers that you can use. This build uses the 50 HP one because it can use Slash for 1 colorless. The other one has more HP with 60, but its first attack requires a Grass Energy, and so including Grass Energy in this build overcomplicates it just a bit. And if you're having to lay down a Rainbow Energy and put a damage counter on the Scyther to attack with anyway, you might as well just use the one that starts with 50 HP. So running 3 of the Scyther with 50 HP and the colorless Slash attack, and 2 copies of Aquapolis Scizor, which will be your main attacker. You don't really need more than 2, since they are going to become tanks very quickly with all of the special metals stacked on them. And then 2 of that Legendary Collection Muck. As I said earlier, you won't always be using Muck. That's in here mainly for those matchups that are overpowered because of Pokemon powers, and so you can shut those down, really slow those down. But in all of your other big matchups like Steelix or Kingdra or Electabuzz, you're not going to use Muck at all. That's going to be one of your throwaway cards that you can use for Furret's Scavenger Hunt. And it's a shame that Furret and Scizor are both from Aquapolis, because if they were in earlier sets, they would have seen a lot more play because of where they were placed in the rotation. Aquapolis cards didn't get very much time to shine at all, which is why I'm glad there's a lot of retro formats bringing them back and incorporating those cards and expanding the amount of play that they get to see. So 2-2 on the Furret, because it is kind of just a utility card. You don't need to weigh the deck down with them too much. And then 2 copies of Mantine to help combat those fire types that aren't completely shut down by Muck. Furret's also going to be a huge help in getting a Mantine set up in those very specific situations where you need to use Giant Wave, because it does require 2 water energy. This deck only runs 3 water energy, but it does also have Rainbow Energy, which can get grabbed with Scavenger Hunt, and those are going to be pretty crucial in the situations where you do need to use Giant Wave. Mantine is one of those tech cards that a lot of Steel decks use that I really disagree with. Yeah, you can deal 80 damage for only 2 energy, but you're also weighing down your deck by also including those water energy in it. And so I thought there were a lot better alternatives, but I also wasn't a competitive player then. This is a deck that runs 15 Pokemon, but with 3/4 different evolution lines, and so your ideal start will be with a Cleffa. You really need to get an Eek off on your first turn. That way you can really get your setup. Ideally, you need a Scizor and a Furret on your second turn in order to really get the ball rolling with this deck. And usually you can do exactly that. Even if you can't get an Eek off, you still have a full playset of Professor Elm and a full playset of Copycat. So as much hand refresh as you could possibly cram into this deck to make sure that you're getting the exact setup that you need. If you know you're up against a Gatr deck, you're also going to be scrambling to get that Muck out on turn 2 or turn 3 after you've already used Scavenger Hunt and gotten those metal energy that you need. You've also got a full playset of Pokemon Fan Club, which is going to be another essential card for getting those basic Pokemon onto the bench. That way, when you do use all these methods of hand refreshing, you're going to be able to get those evolution cards, and you've got your setup on your next turn after playing these key supporter cards. And this deck is heavy on supporter cards. Professor Elm might as well be one too, since you can't play any trainer cards after a Professor Elm. But the reason for running full playsets of all 3 of those cards, your Elm, your Copycat, and your Fan Club, is so that you're almost guaranteed to get at least one of them in your early turns. Now, after you've played your supporter per turn, you're going to have to rely on regular trainer cards to get the rest of your setup. So, Pokemon Trader is another card that's going to be hugely helpful in getting the right evolution card you need in your hand. If you're playing against a Steelix deck and you've just got 2 Mucks in your hand, there's no usefulness in that. And so use Pokemon Trader, get the ones that you really need, get a Furret out there, get a Scizor out there, get that heavy metal train chugging along. Start dealing these massive amounts of damage, because against decks like Kingdra or Steelix, you are going to need to start dealing out huge amounts of damage to survive. Energy Charge is going to help you late game get those metal energy out of your discard back into your deck, so that you can use Scavenger Hunt and get them back onto Scizor. But if at that point in the game you've had to play a Muck, you don't have Scavenger Hunt available, you still will probably have plenty of trainer support in your Elms and Copycats that you didn't use early game in order to fish those out in an alternative way. So now we're getting into the real diversity of cards for this deck that would help it tackle a multitude of scenarios in a competitive play environment, like GenCon 2003. So you've got Double Gust to help swap out a little bit of your bench and also get easy kills on your opponent's opposing Pokemon. You got Balloon Berry to assist with retreats, like if you get a Muck stranded in the active position, or if you just need to retreat a Scizor that's about to get knocked out and save yourself an extra turn, deprive your opponent of a prize. And you've also got Gold Berries, which are going to be very important for healing up Scizor. You've only got 2 Scizors in this deck, and you're going to transform them into tanks very quickly, but that still won't stop them from taking damage completely. So keeping a Gold Berry on there as often as you can is always just a great tool to have handy there. That way your Scizors are tanking hits, and what little damage does start to accumulate you can take care of, because sometimes you will also have to put some Rainbow Energy down in order to substitute for one of the metal energy that you may have lost to the discard pile from another knockout. But you can use the 10 damage placed by a Rainbow Energy attaching to Scizor in order to activate a Gold Berry. That way Scizor is healed before you attack. You can put another Gold Berry onto it so that it's going into its next turn, and when your opponent attacks, that Gold Berry could potentially activate again and heal up your Scizor, giving you another turn to attack. Full playset of those Rainbow Energy, not only to help out Scizor in getting Metal Energy attached for Heavy Metal, but also in helping power up Mantines in those matchups against Fire-type decks. Full playset of Metal Energy, because that's the entire point of the deck, is obtaining Metal Energy out of your deck, attaching them to Scizor for Heavy Metal. 2 copies of Warp Energy, which I feel is an underused energy. It's basically a free switch. And then 3 Water Energy for that Mantine. Like I said earlier, this is the exact Jason Klaczynski build that he used at GenCon 2003, so this is a tournament-style deck, unlike most of the other decks I do videos on for this channel, which are more like the most basic framework of a deck that you can build without any of the techs or anything else you would need to add to the deck in order to make it hyper-competitive for a tournament. But even the most expert deck builder can't prepare for every scenario. They can't cover every weakness in a deck, and this one does still have a couple of outstanding weaknesses. The one deck or the one card that I consider to be most dangerous to this Scizor build is Dark Houndoom. Houndoom builds were pretty popular. There's the fire type Dark Houndoom, and then also the regular Houndoom that was the dark type. But it could OHKO Scizor for 2 energy, could also utilize Furret in order to get those dark energy easily. It didn't care about Muck at all. Dark Houndoom only had 60 HP, so Scizor could hit it back and OHKO it very easily on the rebound, but Houndoom decks also ran Focus Band and oftentimes the Rocket Hideout Stadium. So those mixed Houndoom decks could be pretty hard to contend with. Another smaller threat is Pichu with a Focus Band, as it can come out into the active position, use Zap over and over again, and potentially weaken any Mucks or Furrets that you have on your side of the field, if not knock them out after a few turns. Since Muck and Furret both have 70 HP, you can feel relatively safe against a Pichu, but Pichu was also used regularly in spread decks or some indirect damage decks like in Dark Crobat. Dark Crobat could ignore Metal Energy and get damage counters onto Scizor, but Dark Crobat was also afraid of Muck, which in turn you could pull out a Pichu and put damage counters on that Muck as well as a Furret, so there's a little bit of balance there, and Scizor typically comes out on top anyway. There are also a lot of modifications you can make to SMF if you want more casual play or you want to alter it to fit your playstyle, but I will save those for a separate video when I go over the Shuckle version, the version that I like to play for casual play with friends that I think is more fun to play. It's not as technical. So look forward to my next video, which will be the casual play version of SMF. You can also find links to all my socials down in the description, as well as a link to Jason Klaczynski's blog, which lists a lot of his personal deck lists. If you've got any Neo on deck requests, throw them down in the comments, and until next video, bye.